So I've been thinking a lot about identities. I have a lot of them, and they're not so helpful. So I thought maybe let's just spend just a minute or two closing our eyes, and I'll say some words, and just pay attention to what arises in your mind and what you're feeling. And you can actually catch the image in your mind of what the word evokes. So let's just close our eyes for a second, and I'll just say a few words. Woman, non-binary, man, young, old, healthy, sick, strong, weak, student, worker, okay, you can open your eyes. So conventionally we use these labels. They help us distinguish one thing from another. That's helpful. And we usually organize and understand things through categories. So, we can maneuver in the world with these identities a bit. I know, just many different ways, kind of to know where I'm going to go and what I can do and where I can do it. The trouble is that due to our ignorance, we grasp the I and mine as inherently existent. And so inherently existent, not changing, separate, independent, set up from its own side. And our identities are constructed with this ignorance. And this is what brings the misery to ourselves and others in so many ways. So one of my identities is I'm a strong woman. I've had this identity since late teens, early 20s. So when I think about my body now and what I can do, you know what? I'm not a very strong woman. I used to be, and I'm not so much now. But that identity is still locked in my brain, and it is this permanent setup from its own side. It's who I am. So how does that play out, So I'm doing something here and there's something that's in the way and I need to move it and it's heavy and I try to pick it up and I can't pick it up. I've forgotten kind of what my body actually can do now because I have this identity, I'm a strong woman. So then what happens? So if I'm not very clearly thinking, I can get frustrated or angry or irritated that I can't do what I think I should be doing because I'm a strong woman. Or it might be that I look at something and I need to pick it up and I know I can't, and I remember, I can't do that. and then I ask somebody else. That's a much more comfortable experience for myself and others, actually. Huh? And sometimes when we keep hold of these identities that don't really reflect where we are in this moment, we can have frustration, anger, sometimes sadness, sometimes fear. And so it's really helpful to try to start identifying what identities we have and how realistic they are. How realistic they are. All the causes and conditions which have influenced this body and mind are not appearing to me when I am grasping at, I'm a strong woman. So I'm grasping onto an identity that no longer exists. So the tension between what my body can actually do and what I'm grasping at, this identity, is incongruent. It's misery-making. So if I don't remember that I'm 72 now, and, I have diminished strength, and then if I don't remember that, then I start trying to do things that I actually cannot do. And then there's a reaction to that. So if I can front load and remember what I can do this day, in this moment, with this circumstance, that is so helpful than to just go kind of automatic pilot on, I'm a strong woman. Another way that it plays out, these identities, is if I'm looking at someone, I say something, and they say something to me, and I perceive what they say with, just this limited auditory system that I have here. And I am seeing the person as separate, inherently existent, set up from their own side. My mind collapses everything about that person into the words they just said. And I react with anger. The only thing that is appearing to me is what is directly in front of my eyes, as if established by its own power, independent of everything that has come before in this life. All the causes and conditions that have influenced the way this person is thinking, as well as me looking at the person, none of that appears. So I'm experiencing a separate, unconnected moment, and anger arises. My identities are all tangled up with grasping an inherently existent I. And so conceiving an inherently existing I leads to exaggerating the distinction between myself and others, creating a separation that is actually not even there. And this clinging to this inherently existent self is the force behind our afflictions, lies behind our self-centered actions that create negative karma. Dharmakirti, who was an Indian Buddhist philosopher in the 7th century, he wrote, "Once there is a self, there is an idea of an other. From this arise attachment and hatred to self and others respectively. So long as one is embroiled in these, all faults will follow one." And then Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chömro, he also says, when the view of a personal identity, which is ignorance, apprehends the self, discrimination arises between self and other. Once you have made that distinction, you become attached to what is associated with yourself, and hostile toward that which pertain to others. And so if I just take this example of this identity of I'm a strong woman, I'm not remembering that my body and mind are collections of many moments and parts. They're transitory, perishing, each moment, nothing solid, fixed, permanent. Of course, we don't see things that way. If I examine all the parts of the body, I can remember that the body is made up of many parts, especially if I remove the skin and start looking at, dissecting everything that's inside this sack, then I can, there's not one solid thing here that never changes. But as soon as I put all those parts together and assemble them in my mind, then what I see is this real, unchanging, permanent, separate thing that I have to protect, that I'm separate from. So really not helpful. We forget that we're changing moment by moment, but we can train ourselves to remember that. We can deconstruct things so that we can kind of reconstruct them in as they actually exist, and keep practicing that. So I try to diminish my identities. And for me, that means really trying to hold them very lightly, because they're changing moment to moment, dependent on so many things. So let's take gender for a minute. So I'm a woman. This body and mind arise dependent on causes and conditions. Holding on to an inherently existent gender supports the arising of attachment and aversion. That's what it always does. Then my time is spent defending my identity. Then there's not so much time to really develop the things that I want to develop, like bodhicitta, wisdom. So the beautiful thing about this path is that we always have choice. I came in this world seeing things not accurately, grasping at inherent existence, myself and other, everything. And nothing exists that way. So I can continue to use my mind to dismantle that erroneous view. Holding tight to a singular idea of who I am is so far from what actually exists. All the causes and conditions which have influenced who I am is reduced to one word: woman. Not helpful. So thankfully we can determine what identities we have adopted, and we can practice holding them lightly, remembering that they're just labels about things that are changing continually, moment to moment. And what we actually see directly at this point, at least for me, is like an illusion. It appears one way and exists another. It appears inherently existent. All of you appear inherently existent out there. There you are, set up from your own side, your own individual separate thing. And here I am, same. But everything here actually exists dependently. Depending on what? Causes and conditions, parts, and being merely labeled by the mind. If we can keep that in our mind and our heart, then we stay connected to one another. We don't feel separate, lonely, different than, outside of. Instead, we feel part of, connected to, able to give help, receive help. And when we do it that way, some joy can arise, some contentment can arise, and that's because we are seeing things in a more realistic manner. So let's do that.